Imagine you're soaring 20,000 feet above the French coastline, engines roaring, the sky a battlefield. The enemy, a sleek German fighter, appears through the clouds, unaware of the storm about to unfold. A single push of a button and a storm of bullets rips through the air. This is not just a fight in the sky. This is the birth of a new era in aerial combat, where firepower, precision, and industrial might converge to change the course of history. April 15, 1943. 20,000 feet above the French coastline near Dieppe, the leather glove, tight and steady, gripped the control stick with growing intensity as Major Donald Blakesley's eyes locked onto the unmistakable silhouette cutting through the thick cloud layer below. After weeks of exhausting training flights and relentless mechanical issues with the formidable New Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, the 4th Fighter Group was finally about to face the enemy. The colossal American fighters, often ridiculed by British pilots as 7-ton milk bottles, were on the verge of proving their worth in the most spectacular way. Through his gun sight, Blakesley focused on a Focke-Wulf 190 of JG-26 Schlaggeter, unaware that he was about to etch his name into the annals of history. At 300 yards, his finger slammed the firing button. In that instant, 8 Browning AN-2.50 caliber machine guns erupted with terrifying ferocity, each one spitting rounds at a relentless 800 rounds per minute. With the combined firepower of 6,400 rounds per minute in a concentrated stream, armor-piercing incendiary rounds tore through the German fighter's frame. The Focke-Wulf, once the pride of the Luftwaffe with its twin 20mm MG-151-20 cannons and two 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns, disintegrated in the blink of an eye. This was the P-47's first aerial victory, signaling the dawn of a revolution in aerial combat strategy. The Americans hadn't merely built a fighter, they had forged an airborne weapons platform that would forever alter the very nature of firepower. The story of the Thunderbolt's rise began months earlier. The P-47's first operational mission took place on March 10, 1943, when the 4th Fighter Group conducted a fighter sweep over France. Unfortunately, communication issues marred the mission, forcing an early return and the installation of British radio equipment to fix the problems. The transition from nimble Spitfires to the massive P-47s wasn't easy. The Thunderbolt, weighing 12,731 pounds empty and climbing to 17,500 pounds fully loaded, was more than twice the weight of the agile Messerschmitt Bf-109G. The Republic Aviation Factory in Farmingdale, New York, was pumping out these flying giants at an unprecedented pace. By April 1943, Republic was churning out one P-47 every 4 hours, with production surging each month. The mastermind behind this industrial miracle, Georgian-born designer Alexander Kartveli, had a vision that seemed laughable to European engineers: maximum firepower through maximum production. While German designers agonized over shaving off grams for efficiency, Kartveli boldly added guns, ammunition, and armor plating to his design. Colonel Hubert Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group, soon understood the American approach. His unit, arriving in England in January 1943, was flying P-47 combat missions by April. The 56th Fighter Group would go on to become the only 8th Air Force Fighter Group to fly P-47s exclusively throughout the war, claiming a staggering 674 aerial victories. The firepower of the P-47 was devastatingly simple. The early P-47C and P-47D models each carried 350 rounds per gun, totaling 2,800 rounds. Arranged in a converging formation, 4 guns per wing, the P-47 created a kill zone at 250 yards, where all 8 streams of fire intersected. Within that zone, the sheer volume of firepower surpassed anything ever seen in single-engine fighter combat. A single 1-second burst delivered 107 half-inch projectiles, each hurtling toward its target at a blistering 2,140 feet per second. Initial reports from Luftwaffe intelligence dismissed the P-47's armament as absurd. 8 heavy machine guns on a single-engine fighter? It seemed like a fantasy. German fighter doctrine focused on efficiency, with just enough armament to destroy enemy aircraft while conserving weight for performance. The Focke-Wulf 190A5, the Luftwaffe's primary fighter in Western Europe during the spring of 1943, carried just two 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns with 1,000 rounds each, and two 20mm MG-151-20 cannons with only 250 rounds each. While the 20mm explosive shells were individually more destructive than 50 caliber bullets, the limited cannon ammo required pinpoint accuracy. German pilots had honed attack techniques based on ammunition conservation, quick, precise bursts at close range. This philosophy had worked against British Spitfires and Hurricanes, which typically carried smaller caliber machine guns or combinations of machine guns and cannons with limited rounds. But after Blakesley's first victory on April 15th, the frequency of encounters between P-47s and German fighters exploded. On April 17th, the 4th Fighter Group's P-47s flew their first bomber escort mission. Despite limited range due to early drop tank configurations, the psychological impact on German pilots was instant and intense. The sight of 8 guns firing in unison created a terrifying visual phenomenon, something the Luftwaffe had never experienced. The P-47's ammunition loading sequence, 4 armor-piercing incendiary M8 rounds, 1 tracer M10, meant that every 5th round glowed in flight, creating the illusion of an unbroken beam of light rather than individual projectiles. By May 1943, the Luftwaffe's test center began closely analyzing captured P-47 components. German engineers were stunned to discover that the Browning M2 machine gun, though designed in 1933, had been refined through mass production to become astonishingly reliable. Parts were interchangeable across any P-47 gun, something that German factories couldn't achieve. Their ammunition feed system used disintegrating link belts, which ejected cleanly, whereas German fighters used drum magazines or belt systems that added weight and complexity. The American system's unmatched reliability meant that if necessary, pilots could fire their entire load in one continuous burst. German analysts were left dumbfounded by the scale of American ammunition production. By mid-1943, the 8th Air Force was flying over 200 P-47 sorties a day, each aircraft carrying 2,800 rounds, with pilots expending approximately 60% of their ammunition. That amounted to around 336,000 rounds fired daily, more than the entire German fighter force in France received over an entire week. The Lake City Army ammunition plant alone produced 1.6 billion rounds annually by 1943. This single factory outproduced Germany's entire small arms ammunition industry. It operated non-stop, with 20,000 workers maintaining rigorous quality control, rejecting rounds that deviated more than 0.001 inches from specifications. Republic Aviation's production lines were just as impressive. The factory in Farmingdale covered 765,000 square feet, with additional production in Evansville, Indiana. By late 1943, combined output reached over 400 P-47s monthly, while German fighter production across all types struggled to surpass 1,000 units each month. The ammunition plant alone churned out a staggering 1.6 billion rounds annually. When combined with other powerhouse facilities like the Frankfurt Arsenal, Des Moines Ordnance Plant, and Twin Cities Ordnance Plant, American production skyrocketed, surpassing 10 billion rounds of 50 caliber ammunition throughout the course of the war. Meanwhile, German ammunition production for all aircraft weapons combined reached a mere 4 billion rounds. The Americans were outproducing Germany in the very ammunition that armed their aircraft. The difference in quality control was just as striking. American ammunition underwent rigorous inspections with only 2 to 3% rejection rates. In contrast, German production, increasingly reliant on forced labor and substitute materials, was plagued with malfunctions that drastically reduced the effectiveness of their firepower. The U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey would go on to document the awe-inspiring achievements of the P-47 in Europe. With its might, it destroyed 3,916 enemy aircraft in the air and three Tu-102 on the ground. An additional 9,000 locomotives were obliterated, 86,000 railway cars rendered useless, 68,000 motor vehicles reduced to scrap, and 6,000 armored fighting vehicles erased from existence. These numbers represent more than mere tactical success. They were a strategic blow that paralyzed the Wehrmacht's mobility and logistics. The Luftwaffe's inability to counter the relentless P-47 ground attacks meant American air power reigned supreme, operating with near impunity. American pilots, having completed their 25 mission tours, extended later to 35, and then 50, rotated home to train fresh recruits, ensuring a constant stream of experienced warriors. Meanwhile, German pilots fought until they were killed, captured, or incapacitated, and by late 1944, most of the Luftwaffe's pilots were novices, facing the seasoned veterans of the Allies. The experience gap continued to grow. American training programs rapidly incorporated lessons learned from combat. German training, disrupted by fuel shortages and cut short by necessity, produced pilots with wildly varying skill levels, all facing standardized American tactics. But beyond firepower, the P-47 incorporated technologies that enhanced its effectiveness. The turbo supercharger granted the P-47 its full power even at extreme altitudes, while the R-2800's legendary reliability ensured consistent performance with 400-hour intervals between overhauls. In late 1944, the K-14 gun sight was introduced, revolutionizing accuracy by calculating deflection, automatically using gyroscopic principles. Pilots no longer had to rely on crude deflection estimates, as German fighters did with their reflector sights. Even at 40,000 feet in temperatures of -60 degrees, the P-47's guns functioned flawlessly. While German fighters frequently experienced gun freezing above 25,000 feet, especially on wing-mounted weapons, American industrial abundance extended to maintenance. P-47 groups kept vast reserves of spare parts, complete engines, gun sets, and propellers. Ground crews could re-engine an aircraft overnight, while German repairs could take weeks. With spare parts in short supply, German maintenance became a growing challenge, and by late 1944, Luftwaffe serviceability rates dropped below 50%. In stark contrast, American P-47 groups maintained a serviceability rate of 85%, thanks to their expert crew chiefs, who had received extensive technical education. German ground crews, depleted by conscription, were increasingly composed of foreign workers and Hitler. Youth with minimal training. The P-47's heavy fuel consumption, burning 100 to 130 grade aviation fuel, allowed it to sustain higher manifold pressures and increase power. German synthetic fuel, derived from coal, provided inconsistent octane ratings, drastically reducing performance and reliability. By late 1944, German fighters were lucky to get 30-50 gallons of fuel per sortie, when it was available at all. In contrast, P-47s routinely carried 370 gallons internally, plus external tanks, enabling American pilots to fly multiple missions daily while their German counterparts were grounded by fuel shortages. German pilots were acutely aware that every aggressive maneuver consumed precious fuel needed for their return flight. American pilots, liberated from fuel anxiety, could unleash relentless tactics that their German counterparts couldn't match. The P-47 symbolized the American industrial philosophy of overwhelming quantity, paired with sufficient quality. While the Germans pursued technical perfection in limited numbers, the Americans focused on achieving adequate performance at staggering production scales. Alexander Kartvel's design philosophy emphasized producibility over optimization. The P-47 was easier to manufacture than its German counterparts, despite its greater complexity. The principle of standardization and mass production allowed for faster manufacturing at lower costs. This philosophy extended beyond aircraft production. The same 50 caliber rounds fired by P-47s were used by bombers, ground vehicles, and naval vessels, streamlining logistics and creating economies of scale that Germany's fragmented systems could never hope to match. German efforts to match American firepower were futile. The FW-190A8, introduced in February 1944, could carry additional cannons in underwing pods, but the added weight severely degraded its performance. The Sturmbach variant, designed for bomber destruction with heavy armor and 30mm cannons, proved helpless against American escort fighters. The core issue was industrial capacity. Germany could not simultaneously fight a multi-front war and match America's industrial output. Attempting to do so only drained their resources faster. But the P-47's impact didn't just stop at physical destruction. It struck a psychological blow as well. The terrifying whistle of diving P-47s became a dreaded sound, instilling a deep anxiety in German soldiers who instinctively dove for cover at the mere sound of aircraft approaching. American pilots, equipped with unlimited resources, flew with confidence, while German pilots, desperate and starved for supplies, flew with fear. This disparity of mentality began influencing tactical decisions, with German fighters increasingly avoiding combat unless absolutely necessary. The P-47 achieved a kill ratio of 4.6 to 1 over 746,000 sorties. Even though 3,499 P-47s were lost to all causes, this accounted for less than 0.5% of the loss rate per sortie. German fighter units suffered 50% casualties by late 1944. The 56th Fighter Group, exclusively flying P-47s throughout the war, became the top-scoring American fighter group in Europe, with 674 aerial victories, proving that any perceived limitations of the P-47 were nullified by its sheer firepower, durability, and the skill of its pilots. The P-47's 850 caliber guns weren't just tools of destruction. They were emblems of American industrial superiority. Each gun required precision manufacturing, complex supply chains, and sheer determination to produce. The fact that America could mount 8 of these guns per fighter, with ammunition to sustain them, demonstrated an industrial prowess that transcended military calculations. Military historians now recognize P-47 firepower as a decisive factor in achieving air superiority over Europe. Once air superiority was secured, Allied victory became inevitable. The principles established by the P-47 would continue to dominate modern air combat. Firepower superiority through volume, standardized mass production, and industrial might determining military capability. These are the legacies of the P-47. Modern fighters, with their rotary cannons firing 6,000 rounds per minute, are direct descendants of the P-47's revolutionary philosophy. Precision-guided munitions are an evolution, not a rejection, of the firepower principle, another form of overwhelming force driven by industrial superiority. When West Germany rebuilt its air force in the 1950s, it adopted American equipment, tactics, and doctrine. German pilots trained on American aircraft, fired American ammunition, and absorbed the American philosophy, the student learning from the master. While statistics reveal the strategic story, personal accounts provide the human dimension. Colonel Robert S. Johnson of the 56th Fighter Group survived an attack on June 26, 1943, that left over 200 bullet holes in his P-47. His aircraft absorbed damage that would have destroyed any German fighter, yet it still managed to fly back with its controls damaged and its canopy shattered. Colonel Hubert Zemke, commanding the 56th, developed tactics that maximized the P-47's strengths. His Zemke fan technique spread squadrons wide, creating overlapping fields of fire that German fighters couldn't penetrate. German pilot Heinz Knuck, author of I Flew for the Führer, described facing P-47s as being bombarded by a continuous stream of tracers, making bomber runs through escort screens impossible. His memoir provides a valuable German perspective on American firepower superiority. Behind the statistics were millions of American workers, producing the arsenal of democracy. At Republic Aviation's Farmingdale plant, women made up 40% of the workforce by 1943. These workers built P-47s with precision that exceeded peacetime standards, all while maintaining unprecedented production rates. Lake City's ammunition plant operated round the clock, producing billions of rounds in climate-controlled facilities. Quality control inspectors, mostly women, rejected rounds that deviated ever so slightly from specifications, ensuring that American pilots never experienced the ammunition failures plaguing their German counterparts. American workers were well compensated, living comfortably and taking immense pride in their contributions to the war effort. Meanwhile, German production increasingly relied on forced labor under brutal conditions, leading to sabotage and declining quality. The P-47 program, which cost approximately $1.3 billion in the 1940s, was an immense investment in a single weapon system. Yet American industrial power made this affordable, all while producing thousands of other aircraft, tanks, and ships. American mass production reduced unit costs continuously. Early P-47s cost over $100,000 each. By 1945, the unit cost dropped to $83,000 despite enhanced capabilities. In contrast, German fighter costs continued to rise throughout the war, as production dispersal and material shortages slowed efficiency. Post-war analysis revealed the vast gap between American and German production methods. American factories employed specialized machine tools, assembly line production, and statistical quality control. German production, relying on traditional craft methods, was unsuitable for mass production. This fundamental difference allowed America to expand production exponentially, while Germany was constrained by its inability to match that scale. The P-47's 8 guns were a perfect synthesis of American advantages: industrial capacity, technological innovation, logistical excellence, and superior training. No single element was decisive. It was the combination of all these factors that proved overwhelming. The P-47's industrial might delivered firepower that overwhelmed traditional tactical advantages. German pilots, facing this unrelenting barrage, learned the harsh lesson that modern warfare could no longer be won with skill alone. Their FW-190s, excellent by traditional standards, were torn apart by American firepower and industrial production. The 850 caliber machine guns weren't just weapons. They were symbols of American industrial dominance. Every burst they fired demonstrated capabilities that Nazi Germany could never match. The thunderous roar of those synchronized Brownings became the unmistakable sound of inevitable Allied victory, echoing from the factories of America to the skies over Europe, forever transforming the very nature of aerial warfare.